But this is something that's also of great concern here. It has to do with diplomatic relations between Brazil and La République du Cameroon, the stakes involved. If we have to provide incentive to Brazil, why should Brazil jeopardize? Because countries are currently taking blocks, making friendships. You had South Africa was bold enough, you mentioned earlier, was bold enough to ignore whatever relations they might have with France and Britain or whoever, and they took side with Palestine. We're seeing the fruits today. But then, what would be that thing that would encourage Brazil as a nation and the Brazilian government to boldly want to consider their friendship and do some things with Ambazonia to that extent? I think we'll start with Dr. Lobati, and then you can contribute, Barrister Mbeseha, Barrister Pro.
Okay, so um, I don't know exactly how much of the details of the history of the Cameroons that the Brazilian population know. I don't want to go into a long detail here, but generally, to summarize it all, the thing is justice is superior to injustice, truth is superior to falsehood, and good is superior to bad, just as light is superior to darkness. That is a motivation for the Brazilians to do that which is right by Ambazonia. The history of the Amazonia shows that the Europeans, of course, went to Africa to get our resources for their thriving industries. And so they partitioned Africa, and the Germans had us. And then, because the Germans lost the First World War, those countries that thought they had, the European nations that won the war, Britain, in this case France, they took the territory of the Germans and divided it among themselves, and that's how Cameroon was partitioned. And a portion went to the British, the English side, and a larger portion, went to the French side. That's where we were divided. And but unfortunately, you had a second war, and this time uh, the European nations were literally broken down and devastated, were heavily indebted and poor. And the countries that won the war, the United States and Britain, that came in, the United States and Russia that came in to support Britain to crush the Germans, which the French were literally overtaken by the Germans. They insisted that the United Nations trust territories must prepare their colonies for independence. And we, who were formerly German territory, were a united, the League of Nations territory. We did not belong either to Britain or to France. We were taken away from the Germans and belonged but to the League of Nations that mutated into the United Nations. So we belong to the United Nations. Whatever the case, so they were compelled to prepare us towards independence. And these countries that were heavily indebted reluctantly did that. They did not want to because they wanted our resources, especially now that they were extremely poor. So that's where the British went together behind the scenes and connived with the French to pretend that they gave independence as long as they continue controlling our resources. And unfortunately, the destination of the children of Ambazonia was like the the unfortunate situation of the grass that the elephants trampled on, in the sense that we had the political maturity to stand on our thoughts and choose where we want to belong. The parts of the northern Cameroons that were homogeneous, controlled by the Alamidos, were bribed by the British to join Nigeria that the British would control. But we who could decide, the British and the French agreed to exchange hands. So Britain took bribe, and we voted thinking on Ahidjo's false promises that it would be better to be with La République du Cameroon because they have suppressed our option of independence. That's how we found ourselves with La République du Cameroon. And the French now have been basically doing everything to destroy our people, even kill all of them because they want the resources of the land. That is the history of what has happened. Now, in that thing called the United Nations, you have dominant countries. The so-called UN Security Council, you have the United States, you have Britain in there, and France in there, Russia and China. And so the US is very powerful. Britain always goes with the US, and France will go most often with the US, and the US will try to, go behind the scenes and tell Russia and China to abstain. So basically, the US has a big voice there. And the US tries to eat the resources in the Middle East. And they allow the French to eat the resources in Francophone sub Saharan Africa, which is why you heard Biden say that his foreign policy on Africa will be to collaborate with the French to solve problems in sub Saharan Africa. So, what I mean is, you cannot expect Biden's policy to be different from Macron's policy if he is collaborating with Macron. And so, the UN Security Council that has the power to make decisions is compromised. And the other nations are only there in the United Nations. They don't have any big voice. They just participate in the UN General Assembly and say things and vote. But these powerful five decide. So now, just a quick summary there, because to give the whole details will take hours. But how can Brazil help us? The way they can help us is to raise an alarm about the injustice and falsehood happening to an innocent people. A people who just happen to have been blessed to be in a land full of resources where others are coveting it, they want it, so they do not mind killing all of them, destroying them in order to extract the resources, and which is why they are committing genocide. So Brazil may not be able to overcome the United States, but Brazil can raise it up as a principle of standing for that which is right, for that which is just, that which is good, that which is truthful and honest. And at the end, I believe that Brazil will win, because change is coming. Those powers that are now very powerful, controlling the UN Security Council, seem to be the most powerful nations on earth, will lose their international preeminent positions with time. I don't have time to go into it, but you can see it in the demographic change of the earth. We are now 8 billion human beings on earth. The largest population at this time, Asia, that means China was the most populous. It went over to India last year. Most people didn't know, but India is the most populous nation. And by 2100, sub-Saharan Africa will be the most populous part of the earth, which will constitute almost 45% of the population on planet Earth, which means that almost every second human being will be a black, flat-nosed sub-Saharan African like myself. And these very powerful nations we are talking about, if you look demographically, their populations only keep shrinking. And what I'm trying to say is that the future is on our side. And that frightens these people, which is one of the reasons they are doing everything possible to reduce the birth rate, to reduce the population of the sub-Saharan African people. They can call it birth control. They bribe even the Muslims in the north to catch us, our children crossing the Sahara, to go to Europe and kill them silently without anybody talking about it. They come in different ways to reduce the population. But whatever the case, they will not be able to prevent the demographic change. So when Brazil stands with us, the future will be in their favor. I'll just summarize it right there.
Okay, Barrister Fru, you wanted to make a contribution. Go ahead, please.
Yes. La République du Cameroon needs Brazil more than Brazil needs La République du Cameroon. First point. Second point, in matters of genocide, diplomacy can be sacrificed to bring the perpetrators of genocide to book. In the days in 1994, when the genocide took place in Rwanda, the United Nations issued a communique. Never again will it happen on planet Earth. And it's happening in southern Cameroon's Ambazonia, and nobody is talking. Brazil will gain a lot of respectability around the globe if they denounce the genocide that is happening in the southern Cameroon and is perpetrated by La République du Cameroon and its collaborators and the co-conspirators like the French. Brazil will gain a lot of respect around the world if they bring the case, the genocidal case, to the United Nations Security Council and let them debate it and say whether there is no genocide in La République in Ambazonia committed by La République du Cameroon. this is what happened in 1994. The United Nations was dragging its feet until more than 1 million people were slaughtered in Rwanda. And they made a declaration, never again. Well, it is happening again, and everybody is burying his head in the sand. Let Brazil take his head up and denounce what is happening in the southern Cameroon's Ambazonia, irrespective of their diplomatic relations with La République du Cameroon. As a matter of fact, La République du Cameroon needs Brazil more than Brazil needs them. And I don't see how La République du Cameroon can afford to lose or to lose the diplomatic ties with Brazil, because Brazil has called them to order on this issue of genocide. Genocide is a heinous crime around the world, and no diplomacy will replace genocide. Therefore, I argue that Brazil stands a better chance of denouncing this genocide in the United Nations Security Council than most nations in the world. Most nations in the world have one reason or the other. Well, I want to talk about something about what the doctor said about the United States and France. Yes, the United States is a partner of the French in Europe. They are in NATO together. They are in G7 together. They are this and that. But the United States also understand that genocide cannot be tolerated anywhere on this planet. And they know that. So I don't see that when the chips are down, the United States will not back Brazil on this one, just because they have some kind of relations with the French. Thank you very much.
By Mbeseha, please.
Again, I think this is what I can say. We're talking today because the president is giving a press conference in Portuguese. He's addressing it to the Brazilians who speak Portuguese. And I've said earlier, Brazil is one of the largest countries in Latin America. But in addition to that, they speak a language, Portuguese. Portugal is also part of the United Nations. Even in Africa, you have Angola, they speak Portuguese. We have Cape Verde, they speak Portuguese. We have Mozambique, they speak Portuguese. They have Sao Tome, they speak Portuguese. And even East Timor. So the president is not just addressing Portuguese, he's addressing this conference to the Portuguese-speaking population of the world. But today, among those people, the largest one in terms of population is Brazil. What we know is that the president is not talking to the Brazilian government. He's talking to the Brazilian people and institutions that are really sympathetic to our case. These people have a vote in their country. They can influence their government. And so your question was, what will we do to make them turn their cables to favor us? I don't know what we can do. Even if I knew, it is not here they will come and announce that type of strategy right here. The fact is that the president has been able to break this cordon, has ceased from talking only to the French, to the English, and is not talking to the Portuguese. If it comes to what we will give to enable the Portuguese, because anything we're talking about, the ICC, the ICJ, the United Nations, is about governments. Only the government of Brazil will act on behalf of the Brazilians. So we hope that the people who are listening to us, including Brazilian officials, including Brazilian government departments that are listening to our plea, can cause their government to act. I don't know what type of agreement they have with Yaoundé, but there's always something to give when it comes to real life, when it comes to crime. There's not so much you can hide. And when it is truth, there's no way you can hide the truth. We just talked about what happened at the United Nations when South Africa, of all, decided to change the game by not just talking, but by suing Israel. The United States, Great Britain, and most of those countries that are supposed to be, in fact, the five permanent members of the United Nations, and most particularly the United States and France, they were caught pants down. Even in that court there was no way they could come out to defend the evil that Israel is doing to the people of Palestine. And so we can only hope that that is what will happen. As to what we shall give in return, that shall be left as a diplomatic discussion between the government and the Brazilian authorities. But just for the sake of humanity, just for being human, to say, look, you cannot do this to another human being. Brazil has a leverage, like all these other Portuguese countries, including the English language countries that have listened to us when we speak, including the French language people who have listened to us when we have spoken. They can make this coalition and make even what Yaoundé or France or Yaoundé with their allies think it is an impossibility to become a reality. Because there's no way you can hide a crime. There's only so much you can do. Even you find out that trial at The Hague against Israel, the United States could not even come out to defend them. That's their greatest ally in terms of arms supply, in terms of moral support, in terms of finances. They support Israel wholeheartedly. Go ask Harris, what shall we do? Well, so they come now, they've moderated their thing. Say, well, we want to think about two-state federation. They say, okay, Israel, you're defending yourself, but your defense must be proportionate. That's not what America would have said just 3 years ago. And so, again, we hope the Brazilian population, the Portuguese-speaking world, is listening to us. We have already analyzed how the Brazilian state or the government can act. We hope they will do it, and then we'll see some fruits born out of it. Over to you.